Hey everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for yet another Guesty webinar from our webinar series where we invite our marketplace partners to join us, all of whom offer really unique and innovative tools and services for property managers. Now, in these webinars, we're going to dig deep into industry trends and the most current and important topics, including the evolution of the short-term rental industry. And what we hope is that by leveraging these partnerships, it's going to help property managers to maintain a competitive edge in the industry. So today's topic is a hot one, as we know, and it's navigating guest experience in a post-COVID-19 world. And obviously, we've all been impacted by this global pandemic. And in order to come out stronger, we really need to consider how to best leverage the opportunities that this period of time has created. And that's what this webinar is all about. So quickly, before we begin, a couple of notes regarding the GoToWebinar platform. So hopefully everybody can hear us well, and you'll notice that the GoToWebinar control panel has a number of different options, including the ability for you to submit a question. And we love your questions, and we look forward to getting to all of them at the end of this webinar in our dedicated Q&A, but please feel free to submit your questions as they come up. All right. So let's get started. To begin, I'm Shelby, Head of Global Sales Enablement at Guesty, and joining us today is the one and only Callum Hale-Thompson, VP Business Development at Unwrapped. How's it going, Callum?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure is all ours. So a quick overview of our agenda today. After we get introduced, we'll jump into covering the latest data and trends that we're seeing in the short-term rental and travel industry in light of coronavirus. Then we'll talk about the new travel personas that are emerging due to these trends and how you'll be able to craft experiences that will appeal to them. Lastly, we'll share how to optimize your guest experience in order to maximize revenue and generate repeat stays and hopefully loyal guests. And we'll discuss the critical role that Guesty and Unwrapped have in doing this effectively. And of course, we'll finish up with a Q&A where we answer all of the questions that you guys submitted to us throughout the webinar. So jumping right in. For those of you who aren't familiar with Guesty, we're an end-to-end property management software for short-term rental businesses, and our platform simplifies the most repetitive and time-consuming aspects of running a vacation rental business so that you're not only able to run a more efficient operation and offer next-level guest experience, but so that you can also have time to focus on your growth. And by offering direct integrations to all the major channels and the best-in-class automation of both communication and operations, Guesty was designed to be a growth facilitator for businesses, but also specifically it was designed to provide our users with an adaptive and user-friendly platform that will continue to give businesses a competitive edge, especially in times of great change like now. So just a few ways that Guesty helps our clients manage and grow their businesses include communication to all of your guests in one centralized platform, in one centralized inbox, management of all of your availability and rates in one centralized calendar, mobile access to all of your data from our mobile app, all kinds of operational tools that will save you time and improve efficiency, and most of all, the highest level of customization and automation that's available in our industry right now. So we hope that as market leaders in the short-term rental industry, we can also provide you with some hope. And as you may have read in the news, there are still plenty of reasons to maintain optimism for a post-coronavirus world. And according to our data, we're seeing an improvement in reservations as early as the fall. Not only that, but the length of stay is rising, and as people seek out domestic retreats for self-quarantine or workspaces. And when this is over, we expect to see a surge in travel as people make up for lost time. And we anticipate they'll be choosing rentals over hotels in order to avoid crowded spaces and travel more safely. And with that in mind, I'd like to introduce our partner, Unwrapped, and Callum will be sharing with you exactly who these new travel personas will be and how you can best cater to them and provide the guest experience that they're looking for. So Callum, excited to pass it over to you.
Brilliant, and thanks so much for that great introduction, Shelby. It's a real pleasure to be here today. So I'm Callum, and I head up partnerships and business development at Unwrapped. We're a London and Tel Aviv-based startup that helps travel companies to create some really exceptional destination experiences for their guests. We're working with companies and brands across the industry, from global OTAs like Expedia to cruise companies like the Carnival Corporation and hotel groups like the Student Hotel. And on top of that, we're actually also now working with hundreds of short-term property managers just like yourselves. Now, Guesty were our first strategic partner for our short-term rentals product, the Curator, and we actually worked very closely with their teams to put together a great solution that addressed many of the pain points identified by hosts like you. And so it's actually really great to be able to talk to you directly now about our solutions in a bit more detail. So today, I'm going to be speaking about how you can leverage guest experience to maximize your growth in the days following the COVID-19 pandemic. And I don't think I need to repeat what Shelby's already said about how hard our industry has been hit by this crisis. At Unwrapped, we've really seen this damage firsthand as our partners swiftly stopped transporting travelers, they emptied their rooms and they closed their doors. And it's been really painful to watch so many great businesses struggle to survive in these really novel conditions. But with every major setback, I always like to think there's a real silver lining. And I'll say we're all part of an exceptionally resilient industry, hospitality. And this downtime, I think, is going to give us a really great opportunity to rethink some of our most basic practices for the future. How we operate, who we work with, what sorts of partners we choose, and I think most significantly, how we can best serve our guests. I'll be really honest with you, this current situation is truly unprecedented. We don't have a magic wand to fix it all right now. And we've seen lots of so-called experts crop up recently who say they have a crystal ball to the future. But unlike them, I'm not going to pretend that I can tell you exactly what will happen and when. But what I can do is take you under the hood of our company and share some of the deep analysis, insights, and tools that our teams have been working tirelessly on over the past 5 or 6 weeks, as we've been really standing shoulder to shoulder with our customers and really helping them to get through this tough period. And so with that in mind, I'm going to focus on 4 main areas today. Firstly, I'm going to take you through some of the emerging trends we're seeing that will really help you to plan your recovery and maximize your growth in the coming months. Then we're going to take a little look at the types of travelers you might expect to meet in the days following COVID-19. After that, we're going to take a closer look at exactly what these travelers are looking for. And specifically, we're going to talk about why you as a short-term rental host are so well positioned to capitalize on the experience they're seeking in destination. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about how this can help to drive some really important revenues to your business in 2020. From what we can tell, traveler numbers are not really expected to return to pre-COVID levels till at least early 2021. And so we think it's more important than ever that you really maximize revenues from each guest who passes through your doors. And so to start, I really wanted to look at something a bit more positive and take a look at some of the trends that we're already seeing in China. Now, as you know, China was the origin of the coronavirus. It was the first major country to be affected by COVID-19. And actually, it's pretty good timing because in the last fortnight, they've started to really relax many of the lockdown measures and also restrictions on domestic travel between cities in China. And so I wanted to take apart some of the trends that we're seeing right now. The first and most significant indicator that we're seeing is that domestic travel will definitely be the first segment of the market to recover. We've been taking a look at some data from Airbnb and also from Trip.com, which is the second largest OTA in the world. And they're both showing that the most searched for destinations in China are not only domestic, but have a look at that number. They're sub 150 kilometers from the point of origin. So they're really looking for places that are within a couple of hours of travel time by train or by car. And we think this is going to mean a few things when we spread it out to the whole world. Globally, domestic travel is really likely to be the most significant market for travel and hospitality for several months. We predict until the end of 2020, as countries are going to really open their borders slowly. Some countries will remain in lockdown while others aren't. And we're already starting to see this with the situation in Germany and Denmark. They're reopening shops and some businesses, but at the same time, we're seeing countries like the UK, Spain, and Italy are remaining under strict lockdown at the time being. We also think this is going to have an impact on consumer behaviors. They're going to be more tentative because after months of being cooped up in their homes, after we've all learned social distancing as kind of a second nature, we think it's likely that travelers are going to really avoid venturing too far afield. And instead, they're going to choose to stick to some really familiar destinations or even stay within their hometown or city for a staycation. They're really going to be looking first and foremost to stay safe. And they're also going to be looking to avoid crowded spaces. As Shelby said earlier, you guys are in a really great position because of the privacy of apartments over hotels. And so we see some great growth opportunities there. But I think this means they're going to be turning to experts like you for advice on the best ways to travel before and during their stay. Now, the second trend that we've come across is something called Yun tourism. And don't worry, it was new to me as well, but it means cloud tourism in English. Now, during the lockdown phase, many Chinese hospitality and travel companies harnessed some digital platforms to communicate with their guests and travelers and keep them entertained about the trips they might be able to do in the future whilst they were still at home. We're seeing some really interesting examples of this in the US and Europe as well. You should definitely go and check out Google's augmented reality viewing experiences. They've got some amazing museums and art exhibits there that you can travel through. And at Unwrapped, we really strongly believe that producing engaging content is going to be a great way to stay at the forefront of your guests' minds. So when they begin to start thinking about planning that first trip post-coronavirus, you're going to be the first one they think of. And just a little side note, at the same time, once a guest has booked with you, we really think that pre-stay messaging is going to be more crucial than ever before. And that's because travelers are going to really want to be reassured that they can have a safe and enjoyable experience during their trip before they depart, but significantly that this is going to be a trip that's going to align with their expectations. And the final trend I just wanted to pull out is that we think we're going to see an increase in what we're terming purpose or event-driven travel. So for example, in China, as we start to see this relaxation of lockdown restrictions, Airbnb are already reporting a 2.5 times increase in searches for stays during the Chinese Labor Day period. That's around May 1st compared to last year. And this suggests that people are starting to use events as a motivator for their first trips after lockdown. So a really easy tip here, be sure to think wherever you are in the world about upcoming national and local events, so that when lockdowns end, you can really start to target these travelers with your marketing campaigns and positioning. It's a really easy way to see some growth in those early days after COVID. But it's not just holidays and national events that the Chinese travel companies have been so good at targeting. We're also seeing a rise in package trips and what we're terming experiential travel. So if you take a look at Ctrip, they're actually part of the Trip.com group. They're China's largest OTA. They've built out a series of really unique experience packages, which will typically combine accommodation with a specific event or experience in a destination. Some of them are really based on specific post-quarantine needs. So they, for example, have a package for visiting relatives or family members in neighboring cities. Or they have one for staycations, which is called Travel Round Big Cities. You get to go and see lots of different neighborhoods. And I'll be honest, it's a really great way for hotels and short-term rental providers to fill their rooms without reducing rates. But others are a little bit more creative. So for example, there's traditionally been very high demand for reservations at Michelin-star restaurants in China, particularly from their growing middle class. You'd need to reserve at least a year in advance for many of these to get a table. But obviously these reservations were completely wiped out by the coronavirus and the ensuing lockdown. So Ctrip got a little bit creative and they started offering packages which contain a few nights of accommodation in a city paired with a reservation at one of these exclusive restaurants. And this kind of serves both sides because they help consumers to have a really great experience they otherwise wouldn't have been able to have. And at the same time, they're helping to fill that inventory for these restaurants and the accommodation providers. So this idea of traveling for a very specific experience in a destination is really emerging. Before we move on, just want to briefly recap on some of those points. So we think the travel market is likely to take some time to regain momentum. It'll be a while before we see international travel on the scale we're accustomed to. Countries are going to lift their border restrictions slowly. They're going to start by allowing greater movement within their borders, and then they're going to slowly open up again to low-risk inbound and outbound international travelers. And what makes things a little bit more tricky for our industry is it's unlikely that these countries are going to act in unison, so we're going to have a period of inconsistency where rules and regulations vary from country to country. And for this reason, my second point, domestic travel is really looking to be that strong growth opportunity later in 2020. We see it as a really new portion of the market that you can appeal to right now with your marketing and your positioning. Thirdly, we think we're going to likely see some really tentative traveler behaviors for some time. People won't be used to traveling, right? These were the first trips people have done in months, leaving their homes, and they're going to be really looking for reassurance throughout their trip. So we think the role of the host will never be more important. And finally, that we believe that experience remains king. So whilst travelers remain at home, they're going to really want to get excited about the opportunities to travel they can have in the future. And then once they're actually in a destination, obviously they're going to be looking for unique things to do and for you to guide them. Now, China's a few months ahead of the rest of the world. So this is a really great time for us to think about how we can begin thinking about our own recovery strategies and how we can prepare for the day after coronavirus. And we think a good way of doing this is to consider some of the new types of traveler who we predict will emerge in those first few days after restrictions are lifted. Think about how you can position yourself to appeal to these guests. And importantly, think about how you can show that you can cater to their needs as well. Now, at Unwrapped, we've been really busy studying these emerging trends. We've been speaking with business owners, we've been interviewing travelers from across the globe, and we've actually whittled down dozens of these new traveler personas into 3 main groups I can show you right here. We think these 3 are going to be really significant, particularly for the short stay industry in 2020. We've got the staycationer, the escapist, and the opportunist. So let's dive a little bit deeper and take a look at each of these on their own. The first, we term the staycationer. So these people are likely to be locals in a city who really want to travel and be a bit pampered after months of lockdown. But significantly, they're pretty wary of traveling too far afield. And for that reason, they might choose to actually stay in the same city or travel a short distance to a neighboring town or city. What you need to know about them is that they obviously know all of the tourist spots and they're not very interested in them. So you need to entice them by showing that you have the specific knowledge to help them discover some hidden gems in your unique neighborhood around your properties. Now, obviously, restaurants, bars, and cafes have all been closed for some time now. And so it's going to be a real novelty for travelers to be able to go out, eat, and socialize in public again. So make sure you're well equipped to let them know the best places to visit when they do come and stay with you. And the final part is we're seeing a real preference for things like wellness, leisure, and relaxation. And I think it's pretty understandable. Lockdown life's been pretty stressful, and many city dwellers are now looking for ways to unwind in a really safe and responsible way. The second traveler we're seeing, we're terming the escapist. And these are city dwellers who, again, live in urban areas, and they're looking to get somewhere rural, somewhere quiet, and somewhere safe. Now, this group came out slightly earlier than the other 2. When restrictions and lockdowns were first introduced, we saw lots of people fleeing to second homes or going to the countryside to quarantine. But we're actually looking at this group slightly differently because we believe this trend is actually going to continue even after the peak of the virus, when people are exhausted and really just want to get out of those cities that they've been quarantined in. What you need to know about this group is that they're particularly unfamiliar with the destination because they're traveling for a specific purpose of escape. And so they're going to really require some basic services in the places around these properties, and importantly, easy access to some local amenities. And finally, my favorite one, the group we're calling the Opportunists. So this group are really looking to take advantage of the massive drop in airfares that we're seeing later on in this year and in 2021, and also some trends we're seeing around accommodation price drops as well. What's important to highlight is that these guys are heavily experience driven. So they're the type of traveler who actually might be interested in one of those Michelin star restaurant packages that I mentioned. And because they're going specifically because of these opportunities for cheaper airfares, they are particularly price sensitive. We're seeing that this group are quite likely to be younger travelers, and it's also the group that has the highest proportion of solo travelers as well. And interestingly, this group are already kind of out in full force. There are a few studies that came out last week in the UK that showed how inbound bookings into the UK and some European countries, I believe it was Italy and Spain, for January 2021 are up by 220% on the same time last year. So we're already starting to see these opportunists bagging some great deals and planning post-coronavirus travel. So I thought I'd take a moment to have a look at what these travelers really have in common so we can group them and think about how we can best serve them. Well, first of all, they all have a real need for some local recommendations and services. Obviously, they want to have a great local experience when they stay with you, and they also expect you to provide it as part of the trip. It's more important than ever, though, that they can trust you to provide accurate and relevant information to them during the post-COVID days. Secondly, they're looking for things that are nearby. They're looking for proximity, and they really want to know the nearest places they can visit safely, and actually, in many cases, without having to use public transportation or taxis. They really don't want to have to trek miles across your city for a great cup of coffee or a great restaurant that's been recommended if there is a suitable place just moments away or around the corner. Thirdly, they want information and services that are really tailored to their personal needs. So whether they're a solo traveler or a young family, they're going to get something that's right for them. And finally, and I think this is probably one of the most significant parts, they really expect it to be digital. So one of the most positive outcomes of the coronavirus restrictions is the impact it's really had on our digital transformation, pretty much everywhere and in every part of our lives, right? We've discovered we can pretty much do anything, we can work, we can socialize from our phones and from our laptops. And I think this is particularly important as travelers are going to try and keep face-to-face interactions to a real minimum to reduce the chance of future transmission. They won't want to handle or touch some shared guidebooks or physical maps. They might shy away from actually speaking to people face to face to ask for advice. So in this strange time, if you're not offering a digital mobile first service that they can access on their own device, we really think you're going to be failing to reach a large portion of your travelers. And in fact, this is supported by a recent Google study that we found, which shows that even before coronavirus, before all this mayhem, over half of travelers were already actively searching for some local tips on their smartphones after arrival into a destination. The problem is that the resources that these guys have at the moment aren't very helpful. So whether it's about trawling through outdated blogs, looking at review sites like Lonely Planet or Yelp, or even having to go out of your way to search for recommendations from friends and family, it's very time consuming and difficult to source some relevant and trustworthy information. And I'm sure we've all had that experience when doing our own trips. And in a way, COVID-19 is another nail in the coffin for this way of getting information, because a lot of this information is going to be out of date in our post-COVID-19 world. Businesses are going to open up after lockdown at different times, and unfortunately, some of them might not survive the crisis and go bust. So the data that's out there on the internet for travelers is no longer going to be so relevant or useful, particularly for these very, very sensitive travelers. And I also want to highlight that as well as trying to find those recommendations, they're also spending a lot of money in a destination on paid tours, tickets from museums or films, and experiences from global providers like Airbnb Experiences or Viator or Get Your Guide, even when they stay in one of your properties. But again, it's the same problem because they don't know what's good and what isn't. And they have a real problem actually accessing some truly local experiences and then being reassured that they've made the right choice with booking. So this all points to a bit of a larger problem. Where can guests go to actually get some trustworthy advice on places to visit in destination? And I think this is where you guys really come in, because in choosing to stay in your property, guests have already demonstrated a really incredible level of trust in you as a local. You've worked really hard to meet their expectations from the listing to the arrival. You've communicated with them throughout their journey, answered all of their questions, and now you're in this really excellent position to be a trustworthy guide for everything they want to do in destination. But more than that, you also have a huge proximity advantage, as you have communication opportunities with your guests both before, during, and after the stay. And if you look at that stat there, this is the time when guests actually most need recommendations and are actually making bookings for attractions. Almost 60% of these bookings for attractions happen whilst a guest is in a destination. And that's when they're staying in your apartment and they're in direct communication with you. And so we really think that the opportunity here is huge. As a host, you're really in the perfect position to become an enabler of some great experiences for your guests in your town and city. And at the same time, the market really is there for you to take. So we do think this will obviously have taken a bit of a hit due to coronavirus, but formally, this was a $200 billion market that's been growing 9% year on year. And if you look at one of the largest vendors, Get Your Guide, they have an average transaction size of $157. And based on the partner you use, this can net you anywhere between 4 and 20% commission on sale. So there's a huge opportunity here. So I wanted to take a pause for a second and have a look at how you can start to implement some of these practices actually into your guest journey and create that exceptional guest experience whilst earning some really crucial revenues at the same time. And we believe you can do this by leveraging 3 simple experience layers to meet these new traveler needs. So let's start right at the top there. First, you can do this by providing some relevant, curated, and personalized recommendations that help your guests to have an exceptional time when they're not inside your property. So this could be finding a really great coffee shop right around the corner, very nearby, or a hidden bar where they can have a drink on their first night. And this layer is really crucial as a base, and also a base for being able to sell to your guests, because it's how you get your foot in the door and it's how you're able to establish trust and authority as a local expert. Let's go in one layer. It's all about leveraging local service providers. So this is about identifying and then anticipating existing behaviors or needs from your guests, where they're spending money elsewhere, and bringing those in-house so you can benefit from them. So for example, I'm sure many of your guests would arrive at your properties from the airport or train station via a taxi. Wouldn't it be really brilliant if you could sort a taxi for them in advance at a much better price than they could sort of their own, so they're not going to be ripped off, and also earn a healthy commission for you in the process? Or perhaps they arrive in your city early and they want to drop your bags because they arrive at 7 a.m. and you can't get in until 4, but you're not able to let them in until the scheduled time. Imagine if you could help them find a really great local spot where they can store them for a few hours and again, help you to earn some commission. Or if your guests are looking for somewhere to exercise, and you could offer them access to a high-spec gym around the corner at a great price, and again, drive some much-needed revenue from every guest. The final bit right in the center there is all about extending your role to that of a destination gatekeeper and being able to provide some paid local experience and tickets that are really relevant to your guests. As I said before, almost 2/3 of your guests are already making these purchases independently, whether they're booking tours or visiting museums, and you can benefit from that by offering a set of purchasable experiences and items to your guests directly. So let's have a little look at what this actually looks like in practice. Your guests would benefit from discovering some really unique hidden gems around your property, like that great trattoria down the road they can visit for dinner. This is just a brilliant guest experience. They have a lovely meal, all thanks to you, and it really shows that you know your stuff. You're now a really trusted local authority to the guest. But perhaps they also utilize your airport transfer service. Well, that also nets you a healthy commission. And then perhaps during their stay, they visit a museum and you provide them with a pre-booked skip the line ticket. And then after that, because they had such a great time there, you actually suggest a cocktail masterclass with a local mixologist. Both of those are going to earn you commission, but they also provide a great unique service to your guests that helps you to stand out. So I appreciate this looks like a lot. So how do you actually go about developing this partner strategy? Well, we at Unwrapped believe there's 3 main areas that you really need to consider. The first thing, it's all about identifying the right partners for your property and audience. Obviously, if you have a luxury unit, you're really going to want to ensure that the destination experiences you offer match those guest expectations. So that's the first part, effective curation. Then you're going to need to manage those partner relationships on an ongoing basis. You'll want to monitor the quality of services. You'll want to understand guest feedback in real time, because your guests will be talking back to you, and decide if you want to continue working with some of these partners if the quality isn't quite good. And then finally, there's the question of commission. You need to negotiate a good deal with each partner that makes it worth your while to promote these experiences to your guests. So that's one part. Next, all about delivery method. How do you actually share these experiences with your guests? Well, as we've already discussed, you're going to want to make sure it's really personalized. So if an adventurous solo traveler can be satisfied, so can a young family who might really need some child-friendly activities. It also needs to be accessible both before and during the stay. As I said before, mobile access today is more key than ever before. So if you're not providing this content on mobile or in a mobile format, for many guests, it might as well not exist. At the same time, think about other channels you can use. So whether you're publishing things on your direct website, whether you're harnessing your social media platforms, or all those great direct communication channels you have, email, SMS, WhatsApp. And payment processing. How do your guests actually purchase an activity or an item from you, and how do you receive that commission? So these are all processes that need to be worked out to ensure a really seamless experience for both you and your guests. And then finally, it's all about timing. So from speaking with hundreds of property managers, I know that one of the keys to hospitality is really all about anticipating guest needs. So when do you actually reach out to a guest who's coming to stay with you to show how much you can help? We really suggest reaching out to guests right after they book to show that you're going above and beyond and you're going to be there for the whole destination experience. But at the same time, we also see a lot of purchase activity occurring in that 48-hour window right before departure. Kind of makes sense, right? People are starting to stop thinking about work, they're starting to pack their bags, work out where they're going to put the dogs, all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, you don't want to add workload to yourself or your staff. So you really need to consider how you can automate these processes for communications. And then finally, you need to think about the inventory that you're displaying, because in real time, you'll be getting a lot of feedback, which items are converting, which ones aren't, and you'll want to be able to make real-time changes accordingly. Now, I appreciate that you guys are probably very busy with day-to-day operations, and all of this might seem like a lot, which really is where we at Unwrapped step in. So we're a one-stop shop for the guest experience in destination, and we fuel short-term rental hosts with locally sourced experience content, allowing you to inspire, engage, and sell throughout the guest journey. Our platform is completely customizable to your brand and your audience needs. And actually, it even includes some automated emails and SMS to directly communicate with your guests. They'll get an email after booking with a private link to their own personalized local guides, complete with some recommendations, some services, and those experiences we spoke about. And what's really important to highlight is that we manage all those relevant partners for you, providing a curated inventory of some services, experience, and tickets. And we collect commission on your behalf to ensure that you can focus on the most important thing, which is running your properties. And the result? Well, we have 3 main aims. We look to drive increased wallet share from every guest. through the sale of those experiences. We look to improve the overall guest experience and extend it just from the property to the destination itself, helping you to improve your experience and translate that into reviews. And finally, we work on reputation and loyalty, showing that you have a really fantastic guest experience that can be trusted and encourage repeat business through that. Now, we've been working with hundreds of property managers at the moment to prepare for the day after coronavirus. And we put together a 3-point plan on some really great practices from here on. And first, what you can do right after this webinar is think about how you can communicate positively. Many of your guests are really going to be disappointed that they can't travel and stay with you right now. So really think about ways you can allow them to get excited about a future trip with you and imagine all the things they'll be able to do from the comfort of their living room. That's the inspiration we take from the Yun tourism that C-Trip was practicing. You might even be able to actually convince some of these guests to rebook for later on this year rather than cancel altogether, which is a trend that we're starting to see quite a bit. Secondly, really demonstrate that you are able to cater for those new traveler personas that I laid out at the beginning. So you can do this in a lot of ways, but a really easy thing is to share some videos across social media platforms or think about what you're highlighting on your website, what kind of ways you can show that you're caring for your guests. And then finally, obviously, once things start to get back to normal, once you start hosting guests in significant numbers again, really make sure that you're maximizing that wallet share from every guest. And so you might be thinking, how does this all fit together with Guesty? Well, as I mentioned right at the start, Guesty was actually our launch partner for the Curator, which was built from the ground up to integrate seamlessly with all of your current operations. And setting it up is really straightforward. You just need to insert your API token. We'll be able to pull all of your listings and generate unique guides for each one. Then, every time a guest books with you and a reservation is made inside Guesty, we'll be able to email them with the perfect guide at the right time. Every email we send is also stored in the Guesty inbox, so you'll be able to track all of your guest communications. And that means that you can also keep an eye on everything, including your revenues, through our dashboard. And that's it from me. Thanks for listening, everyone. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you today. And if you're interested in learning more, please check out our blog at unwrapped.co. I've written an article on some more best practices for managing the COVID-19 crisis, or please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat with you further and see what we can do together. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Callum. Yeah, as a super service-oriented consumer myself, I really connected to a lot of what you said. And I especially love that point that you made regarding the fact that almost 60% of add-on experiences are happening post-check-in. That really surprised me. And I think it means that there's so much potential for providing an incredible guest experience and generating additional revenue all the way until checkout, if not later. And if a host takes such care of the guest experience all the way until checkout, this is the kind of service that guests never forget. Incredible. So as you saw, Guesty and Unwrapped work together to provide guests with a seamless and personalized guest experience, beginning as soon as they make a reservation and extending far beyond that. So Unwrapped is just one of the many partners that we have available in the Guesty marketplace. And for those who are less familiar with Guesty, and even for those who utilize us today, not only are we enabling direct integrations with all of the key OTAs, but our platform also features a marketplace in which our customers can directly connect with Guesty approved embedded third-party tech solutions across a number of different verticals, just like Unwrapped. And we're constantly adding new partners, by the way, who offer a range of different solutions. And if there's a solution that you don't see in the Guesty marketplace, let us know. A handful of our integrated partners were introduced to us by users, and our DNA as a company is to be responsive and adaptable based on our users' feedback, needs, and also the market trends, as you can see with the coronavirus. Okay, so now we're going to take a brief pause to collect all of the questions. So if you haven't submitted a question, you have one, please go ahead, and then we'll answer them in just a minute. Okay, Callum, we have a question for you. So do you find that guests who have one of these curated stays are more likely to return for future bookings?
Ah, interesting. Okay, so I would say absolutely. I think this is really relevant for property managers, particularly those who have a large number of units and operate in a lot of different markets, but it can apply to others as well. Because we think, when you're selling via Airbnb or HomeAway, it's very hard for you to offer a branded experience to your guests during that pre-stay period. Because we're able to offer that, full brand customization and tie that so directly to the in-stay experience, travelers really associate the great time they have in the destination with the provider they're staying with, and they're able to really identify who they're staying with. And for those reasons, we see they're much more likely to seek out that host or that company in the future if they are able to provide, a unit in the country or destination that they're really looking for. So absolutely.
Great, thank you, Callum. Here's another great question. So who creates or curates the content within Unwrapped? The property manager, or is an Unwrapped doing it? And he said, thanks for a great presentation, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah. It means a lot. So we handle all of the content that's fed into the guides themselves. Our guides are effectively live guides to local areas. So if a new place opens up in around the corner from one of our units, or one shuts down, we're going to make sure that is updated in real time. And we're also able to facilitate small requests for things to be removed or added based on individual hosts' needs. So yeah, we handle all of the content and all of the user interface. Comes straight out the box.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, a lot of questions here for Callum. So this one might be tough, but so if the Opportunists are booking for early 2021, when do you expect to see the escapists and staycationers? Any forecasts?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can look into my crystal ball. I'm not sure I should do that. But I think the Opportunists, right, they're directly driven by price. And so they're following trends we're seeing where airlines are dumping a lot of capacity for early 2021. Some accommodation providers, not all of them, I will say, are providing significant discounts for future bookings. So they're very much tied to what's going on in terms of pricing. The other two groups, I think, are much more tied to what's happening politically or in terms of governments relaxing lockdown restrictions. So I would say right now, I have many friends who are already doing this. People are really looking for things they might be able to get excited about to do on the day after, those staycationers and escapists. And I think as soon as we start to see some really concrete measures and directions from the government, we're going to start to see people actually going out and booking those. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens, with Denmark and with Germany in the next few weeks, because they've started to put in that firm timetable. And I'm sure that's going to start to be repeated across Europe and the US as well.
All right, Callum, I hope you're ready for more technical questions. I think they're good ones here. I'm also curious.
No.
So, well, okay, how often are messages sent to guests, and do we have any control over the frequency?
So typically, our standard product is actually for a single communication after booking, and the host is able to actually decide when that happens. We spoke with lots of property managers, particularly tech-savvy property managers who are using a lot of integrations, and they were getting a bit frustrated by having to send out 5, 6, 7 emails before a guest actually arrives from lots of different providers. So what we do is we create that single first email, which introduces the guest to the platform, lets them see the guides and all of those personalized details, and then we encourage them to bookmark it or go back to that email where they can actually then access the guides offline when they're in the destination or when they're on that plane flying to that place as well. So it's about introducing the platform and then allowing the guests to use it when they're actually, during their pre-trip and actually when they're in the destination itself.
Okay, another one here. So I don't know if you can speak to this. It would be interesting to know if there's any forecast, but which experiences do you personally think will be most popular post COVID-19? Restaurants, entertainment, any particular area we should focus on?
So I guess what we're trying to focus on at the moment, the difficulty that you've got is that, as different businesses, museums, and, particularly large sporting or theatrical events are going to be cancelled for a long period, you've got to look at the types of things that are going to be able to be offered through these platforms in the early days. So, we're looking at small groups of guided tours, things like those cocktail masterclasses I was talking at, things that can be really unique and that can't be replicated in the home environment. At the same time, I think that really does align nicely with the sorts of things that short-term rental hosts are able to offer above and beyond hotels. So yeah, really going down to that idea of local experience, of one-on-one interactions. We think that's probably going to be the biggest market in the first few days. But it really depends on when people start to get back to normal.
about where is your service offering? So do you offer your service in Portugal, was the specific question?
Yes, absolutely. So we're currently, across all of our partners, servicing over 650 destinations around the world. That means it's very easy for us to set up property managers who are in any of those. But at the same time, if you're not on one of our listed destinations, Portugal absolutely is listed, then we're a startup and we're really keen to grow into new markets. So please, let's chat and we'll see what we can do.
Okay, I'll take one of these. So how do you think guest communication is changing due to COVID-19? And I think Callum also hit on this, which is that communication with your guests is going to be more crucial than ever because they feel so uncertain. And so leveraging automated messages to make guests aware of new procedures that you're putting in place to make them feel safe, reassuring them throughout their stay that you're available is going to be really important to make your guests feel safe. And also, a note about communication, it's also going to be more important than ever to communicate with your guests about the purpose of their stay and why they're coming, and to protect yourself, and to take that one step further, also to communicate with your teams in a more efficient way, and to have better processes, and to track everything better, and to make sure that your cleaning team is taking the necessary measures and so on. So absolutely, communication now is going to be more important than ever. Okay, another question here, and I think one of our last questions, just a second. So do you offer ideas for families with children, things to do locally according to age? So that's a question for Callum.
Yeah, a really good question. So it's about understanding what types of travelers will typically come and stay in your property, and then we're able to facilitate content that matches those personas. Because we really understand that a couple looking for a romantic weekend away are going to have very, very different needs to that young family with young children who are looking for kid-friendly activities. So the short answer is absolutely. The long answer I can give you individually if you want to speak about it, and please reach out. I'm happy to provide some more information about that as well.
Okay, and our last question, and of course, please reach out to Callum or to anyone at Guesty to get more questions answered that might arise. But for the last one, do you offer content in different languages? Callum.
Another good question. Yes, we do. Our content is initially based in English because of the markets that we typically serve at the moment, but we offer translation services and also various different solutions to get around the question of different languages. So again, it's often done on a case-by-case basis to really understand the different markets that a certain property manager is trying to reach. But again, please, let's chat. We can see what we can do, and I'm sure we can help out.
All right, thank you guys for all of your questions, and thank you, Callum, for answering. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And coronavirus's impact on the short-term rental ecosystem has been far-reaching, to say the least. And that's why we've created an info center to act as a resource point for all property management companies, whether there are users or not. And within the resource center, you'll find tips and actionable advice and tech solutions and more to help you stay on top of the global health crisis and hopefully come out stronger. So keep your eyes peeled for our other upcoming webinars and virtual events. We have a ton, and we'll be posting all of our events on the Guesty website. And these events will include hearing from you and your peers and sharing advice on how to overcome this difficult time. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, Callum.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone.